So let's go ahead and open up Canvas, because today what I wanted to talk about was the final project. Which, don't worry, you have plenty of time to do this. This is just about, so there's basically three things I want to do today. First, talk about the final project. This is, by the way, in order of priority for me, so depending on how much time I spend on one, we may not get to all of them. So first, I want to spend time talking about the final project. The second thing I want to do is talk about the practice exam for exam 2. Briefly go over the questions, not answer the questions, just introduce them if you haven't seen them, because some students they ask me what's going to be on the exam. Whatever's on the practice exam is my answer. And third, the third thing I wanted to do was go over PIG, although that is, again, at the least priority because its due date is quite far from here. But we'll see. So let's talk about the final project. All right. Whoops. Okay. So as you are aware, the final project has 4 parts to it. Okay, so those parts are as follows. You've got the pre-proposal, the proposal, the progress report, and then your final due date, and then your final due date for it. Okay, I think it's due. When is it due? Is it due? When is the last day of class? Right. So Temple last day. No, Temple academic calendar. There we go. 2024. Boom. Academic calendar for 2024-2025. Fall 2024, it's over here. Monday, December 9th. So as a result, we need to change this. Okay. Got to change this so that this is due, edit, and then we change this to December 9th because sorry, I said November, but it's December. December 9th is the last day of classes. So we'll make it due then. It's due the very last day of classes. Got it? So now let's look at let's start at the end. What is expected for you to turn in? Please submit a link to your GitHub repo. That should be your GitHub. Gotta fix it. Here we go. Please submit a link to your GitHub repo to where your code is hosted. Okay, so first, so I'm just going to throw this out here, and I'm going to remind you multiple times throughout the semester. If you don't send me your source code, it's a 0 until you do. Okay? It also puts you out of the running for the best final project because you didn't turn it in, and I can't grade it on time. So you got to submit your link to your GitHub. That's the most important thing. You got to submit 2 things in order for me to be able to grade, which is your GitHub link and your video presentation of the code, okay, for the final project. Now, it's okay if you don't understand what I mean by your GitHub link. It's just a URL, and you can make multiple submissions. So you can make one submission your video file, you can make another submission your GitHub link, or you could just combine them in one document and say, here's a link to my video file, here's a link to my GitHub URL, or you can put the video link inside the GitHub, inside your GitHub repository. There's plenty of ways to do it. So long as I can find it, it's fine. Okay, but you gotta submit the link to the code. If you don't, that's a 0 until you do. Okay, and it's very easy for me to tell when stuff gets turned in on GitHub because it's going to be time-stamped. So again, there's not really any kind of forgetting. Okay, your video will be a walkthrough of the slides, screenshots, voiceover and or live action. Your video should somehow include your course title, your name and year, and any other details you'd like to convey. Upload your video to YouTube as public or unlisted, and include the URL in your README file and in Canvas. Okay. So what you're going to be turning in is the code, but rather than demoing your code, you're going to show me a general overview of your final project, okay? I want to try to keep it around 3 minutes for that, because I've got a lot of those videos to watch, and a lot of you are not very good at keeping it to 3 minutes, so I want to try to keep it at 3 minutes. If you do more than 3 minutes, I'm not going to watch the whole thing. I'm just going to skip around to the parts that I think are relevant. Sorry, it's just, I literally will not have the time. Okay, so, anyway, we are interested in what challenges you encountered in coding and if you found a way to overcome them or go around them. We understand that it may not be possible to complete your original vision. We are interested in how you respond into the face of adversity. We are interested in the journey, not the destination. The guidelines for an A are that somehow it amuses me for a minute, and I'm very easily amused, amazes me, makes a positive impact on the world no matter how small. Okay? So, anyway, so what do we need to do, so what can you do for the final project? And the answer is a lot. You can do a lot for your final project. It's really up to you. Now, for those of you who are, the idea that of what that is you have no idea, that's kind of terrifying, right? That's fine. It's fine. The entire point of this is to throw you into the deep end of the pool and show you can swim, okay? So if you do not have an idea, okay, then I have provided ideas, courtesy of Harvard's CS50 course, right here for you. 3 different tracks to go over, one for developing games, one for developing a mobile app, and one for developing web. These are not just ideas, these are tutorials on how to do them. So if we go to, for instance, the web track, right, it has a link to these videos from the 2020 version of CS50, and we click over here. This tells you how to build a website from scratch. What is HTTP, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, homepage, and then the homepage is basically how do you build your own homepage with CSS and JavaScript. And if you want to get really get to real fun stuff, how to build stuff using Flask, which is basically how to dynamically create web pages using a web server, which involve, and you can use Python for that. For mobile app development, I think these are slightly out of date because mobile app does go out of date rather quickly. So I'll take a look to see if I can't find some ideas for some updated videos on iOS development. But you could develop an app for iOS or an app for Android. Android is done in Java, I believe still. I think you can do it in another language, but it's primarily Java. iOS is done primarily in the Swift programming language, if I recall correctly these days. Possibly some Objective-C, but not Python. Okay? That's fine though. Trust me when I say that's fine. The games tutorial are done in the Lub framework built for Lua. Lua being another programming language that's very light and very Python-like, but it is not Python. That's fine though. Once you know a programming language, a lot of the, basically everything you've learned can be moved and used in another programming language. Let's go ahead and just turn this tinier. Okay. So, and this tutorial gives you on how to build a game like Pong, how to build a game like Mario. Alternatively, if you want to build a game in Pygame, which is for Python, but I get ahead of myself, you can do that. So these are good general categories for what you might want to build. But that's not all there is. So let me just kind of go through the idea of what can you do, okay, besides these things. You could do something, if you are a musician, right, and do a lot of music and work with music software, DAWs. If you know what a digital audio workstation is, you could build your own VST. I can give you pointers on where to go for building a VST. That's one best project before. Or if you've wanted to learn Max MSP for building your own kind of instrument. Max MST, that's independent on its own, but it's also built into Ableton Live. So that's always a cool thing you can do, building your own virtual instrument. I had a very confused TA at some point. It's like, I don't think this is a programming language. I'm like, I know exactly what this is. This is at Max MSP. This student totally built something cool. So so you can build your own kind of plugins and stuff for guitar filters and that kind of stuff, or your own synthesizer. Lots of fun stuff there. If you're more on the creative end of things for music, you could try making an AI, using AI in some way to generate MIDI that you could throw into a DAW, basically creating an AI generated composition, going through that and documenting the process. That's something we can talk about. I'm very open to these kind of things. Okay. Another fun thing you can do is build some actual physical thing, okay, using easy to purchase electronics. For those of you who don't know, there's things called Arduinos, and my personal favorite is a Raspberry Pi. Okay, Raspberry Pi is kind of great. These are cheap little credit card sized computers. Okay, get them at Micro Center or whatnot, and they have a lot of different projects you can build with them. They're built like this because you can connect them to sensors and things. They're not just computers, but they are controllers for things. You can build robots. You can build. My personal favorite that I'm going to pull up is a Raspberry Pi laser tripwire. This one's a fun one I show every semester, which, they have a lot of different projects on how to build it. Okay, and let's see. So here is a
laser pointer.
So this one is a video basically showing off a laser pointer. It's just simply adhered to the wall with some tape. I've muted this video, but you can go and find it yourself. And there's the Raspberry Pi kind of receiving it, okay? And that's just kind of the laser pointer going into that hole where the Raspberry Pi is, okay?
Because we can turn the lights off, and then we can blow a little bit of flour.
A little bit of flour, he says he's blowing on, and you can see little white things.
We can just about see the laser.
Yep, we're using the flour there.
There we go. We can turn the lights back on now, and then we can get some unsuspecting person to walk through the laser and set it off. And then when they walk back out again,
and
we can see whether it works with dogs.
So it also works with dogs, as he points out.
Come. Yes.
So you could build it to. And he also gave suggestions on how to on building basically this to send out a tweet or to send out a. What do you call tweets nowadays? Now that it's not Twitter anymore, have we even decided on that? No, it's still a tweet, isn't it? So anyway, or you could take a picture with a camera module, but what this is that it's attached to some light sensors, right? Light depends, and it goes through the steps on how you would want to build this. And how do you control these things? Using Python. So you could do this, so you could totally do this in Python and stuff like this. So you can build with hardware, which is pretty cool. Building a robot of some kind, that's cool. Not as hard as it necessarily sounds. Okay, so messing around with this kind of electronic stuff, that's always fun, and definitely a good project. Okay, let's see. Another popular thing that I've seen a lot of students do, is a Discord bot or a Telegram bot. Bot for a chat service. Basically, building a bot for your server that can make automated requests. Those are pretty much almost universally A's, A-level projects, because it's fun, and you can do that in Python. It is not particularly hard, but it's impressive, and it's a lot. It's not hard, but there's a lot of steps you have to go through, and once you go through them, it's a lot easier, okay? Okay, so now to talk about the biggest portion, which is games. If you are interested in doing any kind of game development, this is your opportunity to do so. This is your opportunity to do so for the sake of learning how to make a game, as opposed to doing it for a motivation of I need to make a game to sell money, or I need to make a game because that's my job. It's the opportunity to make something creative, which you don't get necessarily the opportunity to do. Everybody here is fully capable of making a game if they wanted to. It's not particularly hard to do so. Making a good game is difficult, but making a game to just understand how that works, is it doable? Now, there are a lot of different frameworks out there for building games, okay? The popular ones are Unreal Engine, okay? Unreal Engine for building, and this is just basically a graphics engine so that you can make games. So it handles kind of a lot of just how to build nice looking graphics, both 3D and 2D. Another popular one is Unity. Those are the two big ones, Unity and 3D. I'm sorry, Unity I see a ton, by the way. Unity I see a ton, Unreal's pretty popular. But it's its own thing. You don't necessarily need, they tell you don't necessarily need to know how to program to do this, although it helps. Game Maker is a pretty good one as well, from what I understand. If I recall correctly, Undertale and Deltarune are made in Game Maker, and it's a very good, robust platform. Game Maker. A lot of these start out free, and they only kind of get expensive once you try to sell games, if that makes sense, right? So developing is free, but getting, but if you actually try to sell it or want to, deploy it onto like something like the Nintendo Switch, it costs money. Okay. Finally, if you want real free, there's Godot. Godot is an open source engine for making 3D games, also extremely powerful. All these are really good. All these are really good. I think, if I recall correctly, Pirate Software Games, right? Let's see, develop.games, right? So this is a Twitch streamer who has basically he streams video games, but I like this webpage which talks about you don't really need much to develop games. You don't need to be an amazing artist to make a great game. Thomas Was Alone, simply squares. That's all the game is, squares. Okay, pixel art, West of Loathing, it's just stick figures, and it's considered to be a great game. You don't need to be an amazing musician, right? Don't need to be an amazing programmer, and under that he puts Undertale. Undertale is, oh my God, is it a mess of code, and yet it is one of the best video games of all time. Okay, it is like I believe the dialogue's just one giant case switch statement or switch case statement, and it doesn't matter. Okay, it doesn't matter. You make a game and you do it. Then there's all sorts of here's Godot, Game Maker, Unreal. Ah, yes, and then of course Ren'Py, which is one of my favorites of all because, and this is generally one that a lot of students go for. Ren'Py is made for developing visual novels. Basically, think choose your own adventure games with pictures. Okay. Now, this Ren'Py was used to make some of my favorite games of all time. It was used to make Doki Doki Literature Club, and I believe it was also used to make Slay the Princess. And those of you who know the first game, you know why that's a fun game. And those of you who don't, and are Googling Doki Doki Literature Club right now, are very confused as to why a game that looks very cute is tagged psychological horror. I do not play that game if you are easily disturbed. Trust me, that game has all the trigger warnings. It is fantastic. It is a great game, and it's the kind of story that I love. If you've played it, you'll understand what I mean by that kind of story, with meta narratives and stuff like that. And if you don't, and Slay the Princess, another good visual novel. These are games that are just essentially books that people choose their own stories in. These are great things. This is built in Python. You don't have to know how to play you don't have to know how to do Python in order to do this, by the way. But you do know Python, which means you can do a whole lot more with it, right? That means you can do a whole lot with it. Some of the best projects have been written in Ren'Py. They have been games. And what the students have done, like one of my favorite wasn't necessarily a particularly amazing game. I can't remember. What I do remember was the amount of effort that went in. The student made not just the game, but all the assets for the game. Assets being they wrote all the dialogue. They drew all the pictures, the background and the characters. They wrote all the music, what little there was, right? Didn't have to be much music, but they basically made everything. It was a proof of concept that, yes, I could take this and make a full game out of it. That's amazing. And it showed a lot of love for their own game and for themselves. It was fantastic. Another one visual novel one that won was a game that I remember distinctly. It had a puzzle aspect to it, and it made you have a drag and drop puzzle in the middle of the game. That was something they could totally program in there, and that was fantastic. I loved it. What other games have won best prizes? One of my favorite games was one that was WarioWare inspired. Who here knows WarioWare, right? Yeah, some people do. WarioWare. Yeah, WarioWare, there was a specific game. It's WarioWare Inc., Mega Micro Games. What WarioWare is that it is these very, very short games. Like, for instance, here's the Legend of Zelda game inside that. And basically, there's like 100 of these games inside this. I'm not saying you have to make 100 games. But the goal of this game is very simple. Get Link into this door. That's it. You get him in, you win. If you don't, you lose. And you have until this timer until this bomb explodes, which depending on how many games you've beaten in a row, that timer gets shorter and shorter. It's a lot of fun to try, but basically these are simple games, such as like mash on the A button to keep the person out of the door. If you don't mash fast enough, the person gets in, or just simply press A to dodge. They're very simple games, but they're very fast and they come at you fast. And one of the best projects was somebody who did 5 micro games. Now, WarioWare has a certain aesthetic, and they totally ripped off that aesthetic in a good way. Like the avatar for the person was literally one of the students, and in one of the games he had to duck. And to duck, he just literally took his avatar and shrunk it. Literally just did that, shrunk it down, made him half size, and did an animation just to kind of shrinking animation. So it wasn't even like an instant flick. It was like a deliberate, oh, that looks awful kind of choice. Another game, like one of the other micro games, was Punch the Fish, and it was just simply him basically having fish above him, launch above him, and it was just simply you had to press spacebar at the right time to punch only the red fish. And not punch the white fish. It sounds silly, and they are silly, but it was just these silly little game concepts. They didn't have to be big, particularly big game concepts, right? You get what I'm saying here? They can be very simple. If, however, you do need some inspiration for these things, so when we start talking about, so one of the books I have over here that I have in our syllabus is Automate the Boring Stuff. And we're going to be looking at this in the upcoming weeks when we go over regular expressions. Okay? It's listed in the syllabus. It's free. Al Swigert, I believe, is the name. And he has a ton of other games in here. Ooh, one on Minecraft. Coding with Minecraft. Cool. Cracking codes with Python. Invent your own computer games with Python. But over here, more importantly, making games with Python and Pygame. Pygame is a library, okay? It's not included with Python. Sorry, by default, okay? Like if I go over, so for instance, if I boot up a terminal and I do, let's see, I need to increase the size of this. So give me a second. It's all what happens when you install a new operating system. Let's go ahead to scrolling, custom, and text. We need that to be much bigger. Yeah, much bigger. Okay. Here we go. Sure. Okay. I didn't want it that color, but hey, whatever. Okay, so if I boot up Python, right, and I try to import Pygame, it's not a by default included library. What you need to do is you have to install it, which is fairly straightforward. You You can download it and install it, or you can do something called pip to install it. You can go to the website for Python to figure it out. Linux has a really easy time of installing it, so it's very nice, but again, it's really easy to kind of do these things, and once you know how is the key. But over here, he has basically different chapters on how to build different kind of games, such as Wormy, a snake game, or Tetrimo, how to build a game of Tetris. For a lot of games, a lot of times this is very intimidating. Can you just simply open up a tutorial on YouTube and follow the tutorial on how to build a game? Yes, but yes, because that is an amazingly effective way to learn, an amazingly effective way to build your own project. But you need to make sure you add something to it to make it your own, right? You have to add in some new element to the game. You got to make sure you got to change the graphics up. Maybe you got to make it your own. Maybe Tetris with power-ups or something, right? That could be fun. Or maybe something where, or maybe a mode where you have to, maybe perhaps a snake game where you have to try to control two of these guys at once, right? Once you have one snake, it's not necessarily too hard to imagine, okay, I've got two. One I'll control with the arrow keys, and another I'll control with the WASD keys, right? These are just suggestions. You can come up with your own ideas, and you have plenty of time to come up with your own ideas, right? But these are all different kinds of games you can build, and they're all reasonable to do in this amount of time. And there's plenty of tutorials. Popular one that students end up building is Flappy Bird. That one's generally they had a lot of different clones of it. So you can make your own clone of a video game. Just if you really want to get that good grade, you want to add something to it. Okay. Obviously, I'm talking about games because I enjoy playing video games a lot. But that's not to say that best projects go only to games. No, they don't go only to games by far. If you are an engineering student, like in your senior year, or a biology student in your senior year, or you're doing some kind of undergraduate research, this is a great time to see, hey, can I use what I learned in my class with my undergraduate research, or with the project in my other class? You are allowed to double dip your final project in this class. Now, double dipping is explicitly prohibited by the student handbook when you don't have permission from your professors. You have permission from me, you just got to get the consent of your other professor. So if you want to double dip your final project, in other words, use the same thing for two classes, you got to talk to me. And then the way it will work is I'll just simply tell you, talk to your other professor, then you can CC us both on an email to, send us both an email at the same time to confirm, hey, I spoke with you both and you both gave me permission. That's it. Just basically get it, we just have to have it in writing, that's all. And then you can do it. It's just to make sure that everybody's on the up and up. The thing is that basically, professors normally like this if they're informed about it, right? It's when students like turn in papers for another class, and without telling another professor that this was something I already wrote. That's when they get really annoyed. So, what will I say no to? The most common thing I say no to for students is when there's something that's just not enough there, right? When there's not enough there. I get students asking me, can I make tic-tac-toe or can I make hangman? And in my opinion, those games are definitely not enough for a final project. Why? Because they're basic homework assignments we give out in a lot of classes. I don't give them out because they're done to death and I feel they're not that interesting. What is interesting are more advanced games, okay? More advanced games like one of my personal favorite, Gobblers, which is made for kids, but tic-tac-toe was made for kids, and you were totally willing to do that. And this one's a lot of fun. The difference here is that it's tic-tac-toe. As you can fully see, it's tic-tac-toes with these little pieces. What is the difference? The difference is that you've got small, medium, and big pieces, and you can put those bigger pieces on top of smaller pieces, covering them up. It adds a layer of depth and strategy. It becomes really, there's no tying in this game. The game goes on until somebody wins, because you can also move pieces that are available. Coding this game up, I think, is a lot more interesting than doing tic-tac-toe. Even better if you add graphics, right? And the graphics can be very simple. Just simply you could use Turtle to make the graphics if you need to just draw circles on a board. Although I highly recommend instead taking the time to learn Pygame. The time you take to learn Pygame and then implement it will probably be less than the time it takes to do it with Turtle graphics. I really do not recommend Turtle graphics for final projects. The one time I've seen Turtle graphics used for a final project that worked and got best project, the one time that it worked, it happened to get best project, and that was like creating an app for taking an image and then creating the sewing pattern for that image using a turtle. And that makes sense because of just the geometry that was involved. It was, okay, what about Hangman? Hangman, again, not very interesting here. What is interesting is a very common project I give out in 2168, CS3, which is Evil Hangman, which is very well done, but we know, but it's from, this one is a computer program that cheats at Hangman. Here, the computer, instead of choosing a word, it maintains a list of words of every word in the English language and then pairs it down as the player makes guesses. Effectively what it does is that basically it says, oh yes, I was thinking of this word the entire time. But no, I was just simply thinking of all the words that fit into the guesses that you make. And this is fantastic. You could make a Wordle app. You know, everybody's played Wordle here or familiar with it, right? Right, for those of you who aren't, Wordle is a New York Times is a game you can play on the New York Times. You get 6 chances to guess a 5-letter word. Okay. Let's go ahead and I'll just simply guess that. And that tells me that I've got a T in the correct position and an N and an N is in this word, but not necessarily in the correct position. Okay, that's what it tells me. Okay. What's more fun, in my opinion, is that the same strategy that works on the computer for Cheater's Hangman works for this game, Absurdle. And so this is a kind of minimalistic thing. I had somebody build a website using Flask that did this, and all it was just, not this, but just Wordle, and it just looked like a website. But I saw the Flask running in the background. That got a very high grade, you know. So anyway, this is Absurdle, which is kind of helps demonstrate what I was talking about with the cheating version. So give me a 5-letter word, somebody. What? Water. It's going to, tell you you're wrong, and that's fine. That's the intended thing. Next person. Brick. Okay, cool. Brick. Also says it's wrong. Not surprisingly. Horse. All right, so I'm going to hit give up here, and it's going to tell me really give up. It's going to tell me funny. Actually, but notice over here on the bottom it says actually don't give up. Funny. It's a cheating game. What happened is that I gave up, and so it selected one of the valid words. Specifically, it selected a word that did not have any of the letters from water, brick, or horse in it, which was funny was one of those. And so when I guess funny, it says, no, the game has to actually keep going. So I got to find a word that isn't correct that it's funny. And it's like, okay, I have to finally start giving him some correct letters. So if I give up here, it's going to say the word was gummy. Actually, don't give up. Well, tell me gummy here. Okay, let's see if it's cornered at this point. No, it's not cornered at this point. So give up again. Dolly. Actually, don't give up. Okay, let's see. Surely it has more room. It still has plenty of room to maneuver here. Give up. Notice that we've got more than 6 guesses here. Puppy, okay, actually don't give up. We're running out of space for it to maneuver. Okay, good. So it was literally at the 7th guess over here saying that it had only one possible word left. And only when there's one possible word left does the player actually win. And so the fun here from the player's perspective comes from not trying to guess the word it's thinking of, but instead trying to figure out how can I linguistically corner this program as quickly as possible. Or, you just give it to an unsuspecting friend saying it's my Wordle clone and it's unbeatable, and then you just totally troll them with an actually unbeatable version of Wordle. You can do things like this. It's a lot of fun, okay? And this is a great opportunity to have fun with your projects. Okay, so how long have I been speaking for? It is currently, 2:38. Okay, any questions on the final project so far, on ideas that you could have? Yes? No, it does not have to be Python. You can do it in any programming language you choose except for Malboj. Don't do Malboj. You're just going to hurt yourself. Thank you for the one person who got that joke. Okay, if you're interested, you could try doing it in some esoteric language like Ook. The Ook is the programming language for orangutans, which just simply, all commands are simply some variation of Ook. The Ook programming language is actually a derivative of a language called, and you'll forgive me, it's a derivative of a language called brainfuck. Forgive me for that, but that is simply the name of the language. The aforementioned language is a esoteric programming language that is just simply consisting of the following characters. This is it. It is a Turing-complete language, meaning it can do anything any other programming language can do. And it's just simply these 8 characters. That's it. You want to make something, and what you could do is you could possibly take, if you're interested in just programming languages in general and doing fun things with programming languages, you could build a programming language. You could build a program that takes this and converts it into a valid C program, or takes a C program or some other program and converts it into this. Although that one's a bit harder. That latter one's definitely a lot harder, actually. Taking this and converting it into a programming language is definitely much easier. Anyway, no. It is just simply so Ook is just simply this same programming language, but made for monkeys. Here is Hello World in the Ook programming language, which, as you can see, is a bunch of Ooks. The difference is where the punctuations all are. Okay. So it is. Oh, there's an Ook plus now. That's funny. All right. So there's a lot of people have fun with. So the entire point is to have fun. All right. Other questions on ideas? Because I'm going to once I'm done with ideas, I'm going to go on to mechanics and what you should expect to do over the next couple weeks. Yes? Of different languages like Ook? Or just languages in general? That's an excellent question, actually. So different languages have different advantages. What it comes down to is that some so broadly speaking, we've classified languages into 2 types: compiled languages and interpreted languages. Compiled languages are like C, and I think that's the big one. I think Rust is compiled. And the idea here is that you take a programming language, you take an algorithm, you implement it in the programming language, and then you run a program called the compiler. And what the compiler does is that it takes the entire program all at once and translates it into machine code that your computer is able to read and process in an efficient manner. Generally speaking, compiled languages are extremely quick. Then we've got languages like Python, which are interpreted. Interpreted languages like Python generally allow for a much looser syntax, a lot more flexibility, but they give up some speed. We call them interpreted because you essentially do one line at a time, like an interpreter would take one line of dialogue at a time and interpret it. Okay? Now, Python's good for basically making very quick code, very readable code, and very clean code, and just simply, and a lot of times very simple code. But then there's languages like Rust, which allow you to make very, they have this whole thing about provably correct code. Like this is the right way to do code, to make a program, and it's memory safe and stuff. C is very good because you can basically you can do whatever the heck you want in C, including possibly bricking your own machine, which is one of the dangers of C. C is very, very powerful because it's not a low-level language, it's a high-level programming language, but it allows you low-level access to things. And then there's other programming languages that are specialized. R, for instance, is specialized for statistical use by statisticians. So it comes down to use cases a lot of the time. And also, people make programming languages because something bugs them about another programming language. Bjorn Strusup, the inventor of C++, says there's two types of programming languages. The languages that people complain about and the languages that nobody uses. So so basically, what it comes down to is every language does have its flaws in some way. And for as many people out there who, like me, love Python, there's tons of people who say, oh my God, Python is the worst, I cannot stand it. What is the deal with all the white space? Languages like Ook and this other language over here, okay, they exist for one purpose only, a creative exercise. Just simply, somebody made it because they can, okay? Ook was obviously made to be funny, okay? This one was probably made, I believe, to simply make the smallest possible compiler. Okay, so these kind of things are often just done because they can. There's a specific type of program out there called a Queen, I believe it's called. Yes, Queen in computing, where the program's entire goal is to output its own source code. Okay, so it's a program that prints out its own source code, but it does so without opening the file and printing it itself out. I believe that is considered cheating. But how do you print it out when every piece of the code is, every character you add is a character that needs to be printed out. So that can be very tricky. And they're good mental exercises. But yes, a lot of times we do something just simply because we can, which is fun. Other questions? Yes?
Can you make a fan game?
A fan game? Yeah, totally. I don't see why not. Speaking of just other games, the other thing I want to mention is that emulators are a great kind of making a game for an emulator, such as a Game Boy game or classic Game Boy or Game Boy Advance game. There are platforms for making retro games like that very easily. But yes, fan game totally. Just be very clear that it is a fan game. That basically and whatever assets you're using are not necessarily yours, right? Fan games though are they're a very good entryway for making games in general. Other questions? All right. So that I'm going to mention what we've got here is that we've got the proposal and GitHub Lab. So first, the proposal is simply, and I believe I'll work on that next week. I might push this. I don't think I'll necessarily push the due date back, but I'm going to go over GitHub. Or else, if I don't have time between then and the due date, I'll send out a video that goes over it. But what is this? It's to teach you how to use GitHub. GitHub is GitHub is a platform for using Git. So I'm currently using Linux, an operating system, okay? Installed on my laptop basically over the weekend. Linux so what is Linux? It's a Unix-based operating, it's a Unix-like operating system, okay? And it was developed by, so Unix is a very popular operating system. If you're using Mac, by the way, you're using a Unix-based system, just in case you're curious. Now, Linux was made by Linus Torvalds. He's very well known in the programming community. He's especially noted for needing some anger management, let's say. But anyway, he's basically famous for making two programs both named after himself, Linux and Git, which if you know Commonwealth English, you know that's not necessarily the nicest thing to name something after yourself. Git is very, very good. It is used by large corporations and small teams, and by me, who's just by myself, to basically just simply do distributed version control of files. Basically, this means taking snapshots of your code that you can revert to at any point. GitHub has basically effectively become the de facto website for building and displaying a portfolio. GitHub used to be independent. It's been acquired by Microsoft, possibly, I think it must have been a decade ago. Microsoft has done a very good job of making sure that it's remained basically free and accessible for everyone. It is a fantastic resource, GitHub. It is fantastic. And I will teach you how to use it. It is extremely, and it looks very advanced, but as you'll see here, this is effectively how I learned how to use it and how everybody first learns how to use Git. This is Git. It tracks collaborative work on projects through a beautiful distributed graph theory tree model. Cool. How do we use it? No idea. Just memorize these shell commands and type them to sync up. If you get errors, save your work elsewhere, delete the project, and download a fresh copy. This hurts because it is very true. But it's even easier these days with an app to use. But basically, it's a great way to save your software. You'll be put on, I will teach you how to take those files and do them. And use them. So the reason I also bring this up is that your proposal, okay, is this m.md file. Now, .md stands for Markdown. So you should be able to open it up in any text editor. Okay, so let's go ahead and open it, download it, open it, depending on your, and this is what you have to fill out for your proposal. Let me go ahead and, come on, preferences. Sorry, it's new, so I haven't had the chance to, and sorry, give me a second. I'm just simply, so this is what .md file looks like. And this is the question, this is what you have to answer for your proposal. What ideas do you have for your final project? Notice it's idea or ideas, plural. If you plan on collaborating with one or two of their classmates, what are their names? Do you have any questions of your own? This is just literally a brainstorming exercise as the first part of your project. You will get, I think, 10 points of your final project grade from this. I think it's 20 points for your, I think it's 5, 10, 20, no, yeah, it's 5, 20, 10, 20. 5 points for this one, 10 points for the proposal, and then 20 points for the progress report, and then 100 points on the final project for a total of 130 points. So even if you just simply do a okay amount of effort, you should be looking at 130 points out of 140 for your final project grade. Okay, so you will just simply do that. You will create a GitHub account, create a repo, and host your document there. If I need to, because of the way all the dates line up, I will send out a video lecture showing you how to do that. Which reminds me, okay, so if I recall correctly, our next lecture is on Halloween, correct? Thursday is Halloween, yes. So, would you prefer to hold that lecture over Zoom or in person? Yes?
Zoom unless we have a costume contest.
Unless we have a costume contest. I mean, I was planning on wearing a costume regardless of whether or not I'm on Zoom or not, so.
My costume's in my dorm room.
Yeah, so I'll be costumed regardless. So I just don't know if that will be easier for people to, I just worry that people will not come to class unless it's on Zoom. So, yes, no? Zoom? All right, so I will plan on holding lecture on Zoom. If you do wear a costume, please be sure to show it on camera, though. I will. All right, so I'll send an announcement to do our next lecture on Zoom. Okay, so I'm not done with this lecture, by the way. All right, so let's bring it back in. I wanted to just make sure I was clear about that before I moved on. Okay, before we forgot. So the proposal itself, which will have us a proposal day on November 7th, or I think it will be on November 7th. We'll go over that, and we will talk about, and you have another markdown file for that. Okay, the markdown file is over here, proposal, and this is what you'll need to fill out for the proposal. This is what you're going to be working up to, which is what is the title of your project, summarize it in a sentence or two, in a paragraph or more detail your project. If you're planning on using it with double dipping it, let me know. Who are you working with if you are working with somebody else? And then a more caveat that basically that in the world of software, you've got the 90-90 rule, which is that 90% of the work takes 90% of the time, and the remaining 10% of the work takes the other 90% of the time. So it ends up taking a lot longer to do things in software than you anticipate. So what is a good outcome for your project? What do you know you're going to get done? What's a better outcome, which you hope to get, what you think you're going to be able to do? And what's the best outcome, which is if the stars all align and your code compiles all on the first time and there's no errors, what do you plan on getting done? Okay? And then outline your next steps. Okay? So, we'll talk more about that as we get there, but I want you to start, but now is the time to start thinking about what your final project is going to be. So with that, I'm going to plan on, let's go ahead and just look at the practice exam. So on Thursday, I will be going over the answers for this, okay? So please, if you haven't had the chance to test yourself, do so like on Thursday morning or Wednesday evening, okay? If you get the chance. So this should help answer what will be on the exam. I'm hoping to put the exact same kind of 105 points out of on the exam, still have 100 points. So these short answers, note that they're 0 points because these are, as I point out, these kind of answers won't be on the exam, but they're good to review. I keep them there because they were on an old version of the exam, and I'm always loath to delete good practice questions, in my opinion. Okay? What you can do, for anything that's 0 points, if you're timing yourself, skip it. Okay? File reading. So this question is from a prior exam. In fact, a lot of these questions are from prior exams. Okay? So suppose we had a file called temperature.csv, which contains the daily highs and lows for Philadelphia. The file is composed of 3 fields per line containing the data, the high temperature and the low temperature. Each field is separated by comma. For example, the file might look like this. So notice it's got these dates, you can tell when it was written, right? And then it's got ... to imply that there's more to the file, right? Note that there's not a legend, so you don't have to worry about tossing the first line, right? But write a program that calculates the following. 5 points, the day with the hottest high temperature, the day with the coldest low temperature, and the average temperature of the entire file. The average high temperature of the entire file. So what do you have to do here? This is one of those ones where you want to open up the file, right? You got to open up the file to read it. Okay? Then you've got to go line by line, and then you've got to split the lines to count. And then as you split the lines, that's how you're going to be able to get your data. Okay? A lot of time, notice here it's long because I give you a full page, not because I think it's necessarily hard, but because you might decide, oh gosh, I messed up, I'm going to scratch this all out and start again. Similar question for extra practice. If you have a file named numbers.csv, please add up all the even numbers in the file. there's a number of these methods that I always put on, or these or functions, right? Un or un. If a word begins with un, return the string without un. If it begins otherwise, if it has no un, you put un in front of it. So for all these ones, I will always put in comments over here the key, basically some example usages. So basically, if you call it untied, it will give you tied. If you call it unabled, it will give you able. If you call it unnecessary, it will give you unnecessary, right? It will add or remove un appropriately. So if the wording is it confuses you, I always have examples because those examples I find are elucidating. Okay, min-max difference. Compute the difference between the maximum element and the minimum element. Extra practice, swap ends. First half. Give me the first half of the list. Given a list of things, whatever that list is, give me the first half of the list. And over here, it's like, well, what if there's an odd number of items? I show you what to do here, right? Which is that I want less items rather than more. Has wildcat. Given an input string word, return true if the word contains cat in it, but the middle A can be any character. So kitty is false, tomcat is true, and catnip with in leet speak would be true. Okay? Everywhere, this one's from CodingBat. By the way, CodingBat, great resource right now for you to practice on your Python programming. Okay? Sum of digits. Given an integer, give me the sum of the digits of that integer. We've done that before, or something similar to it. Right? Notice that again, a lot of these are 0 points, meaning they're extra practice. Here's the Monte Carlo problem. This one's from a prior exam. So as I mentioned last time, in the board game of Monopoly, 2 players move around the board, rolling a pair of 6-sided dice. Rolling doubles, such as 2 threes or 2 fives, is especially fortunate, as this allows the player to roll again, essentially getting an extra turn. However, if the player rolls another set of doubles, that allows the player to get yet another extra turn, so 3 moves in 1 turn. However, rolling it a 3rd time will result in the player going into jail, ending their turn and trapping them in jail until they can roll a double. So write a program that will simulate 100,000 Monopoly turns, extra rolls due to a double or count as part of the same turn, where the turn is a single roll of the dice, or more if the user rolls a double. Your program should print out the percentage of rolls without a double, the percentage of rolls that have 1 double, 2 doubles, and 3 doubles. Points will be given as follows: simulating 100,000 dice rolls, handling the doubles, handling 2 and 3 doubles in a row, and then presenting the data in percentages. Another one, and then here's one for dictionaries. Given a string, write a function that contains the most common letter in the string. Use the dictionary to do this. I also mentioned I mentioned when I introduced dictionaries, that for dictionaries being on the exam, this is what I'm going to test on. Something like this. Given a string, give me the most common letter. Given a list, give me the most common word in the list. Given a string, give me the most common word in a string. Something like that. And then this one is a good Monte Carlo program for extra practice. The outcome of any fair coin toss has an equal chance of landing on heads or tails. If I were to toss a coin 3 times in a row, right, there are 8 equally probable outcomes. 3 heads in a row, 2 heads in a row, and a tail, head, tail, head, head, tail, tail, and so on and so forth. Okay? Suppose Professor Rosen challenges you to a coin flipping game for $100. You choose a sequence that occurs after 3 coin flips, such as head, tail, and Professor Rosen will choose one, such as tail, head, head. One of you will keep flipping until one of the 3 sequences occurs, and whoever sequence shows up first wins. So, for example, I give you scenarios for this, and it seems like a fair bet because all of these outcomes are equally likely. But then Professor Rosen mentioned he was sorted into Slytherin, and so you probably shouldn't trust him. So, let's write a program on the next page. to simulate that. And it is a fantastically good puzzle. Once you finish the practice exam, please refer to this YouTube link on Penny's game, which this is what this game is, and how this scam works, and why the statistics are actually rigged in my favor, even though all those outcomes seem equally likely. And the key there is because you choose a sequence and then I choose a sequence, and that actually makes it, and then we keep flipping until one of them appears. That formulation of it is very different than let's flip 3 coins and see how they land up. Okay? So those are those puzzles. Now, typically around this time, as I mentioned, I would normally be giving out the Pig Lab. Pig, on the other hand, is a very long lab. It's worth 200 points. Okay? So it's worth doing, and not skipping. Okay? I will be covering at least part 4 through the class. It is 8 parts. Each part is worth 25 points. So if you do the math, if I'm doing the first 4 parts in class, that means you should always turn it in, even if it's only the parts I do in class, because you'll get at least 100 out of 200. Right? And not be like students last semester who just didn't turn anything in for this one. Right? Okay? It's always better to turn in, if you turn in, you know what this says to me if you turn in the first 4 parts? It says, I was overworked and couldn't finish this assignment, but at least I was paying attention in class enough to turn this in. That's what it says to me. Turning in a 0 on this one says, I was completely checked out. All right, so Pig is a game of chicken, oddly enough. I know, animals. Anyway, so what this is that it is a dice game, and basically the rules are very simple. The first person to get to 100 points wins. We roll 6-sided dice. Okay? On your turn, you do the following. You can decide to roll or hold. Rolling is an attempt to earn more points, whereas holding basically says, I'm going to bank my points and save them, so that I can't lose them anymore. Because the way rolling works is that if you roll a 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, you get that many points. And then you can decide, do you want to keep rolling? However, the minute you roll a 1, you lose all the points you made that turn, not the points you've banked so far, just the points you've made that turn, and then it becomes the other person's turn. Once you hold, though, it becomes the other person's turn. So basically it's saying, how many points are you willing to get this turn, right? That's what it becomes. And suddenly if the person's like 6 points ahead of you, you're like, do I roll some more or do I pass? But that gives them the chance to earn more points, right? Whereas maybe if you're ahead, you take the chance to play more aggressively or more conservatively to maintain your lead. Okay? So the way this works is that this is split up into different parts to build up to part 8, which is part 8. This builds up, okay? Part 8 is a full game of Pig played against the computer. The computer will be using a strategy called Hold at 20, which is a very simple strategy. It literally says it goes for 20 points every turn at least. It wants to, as soon as it gets to 20 points, it will stop rolling. Okay? But we build up to that. And how do we do this? Well, the first thing we do is that we build an automated turn of holding at 20, right? The person rolls until, this simply says, okay, we let the computer try to roll until they get 20 points, at least. Then we will then look at this. This is a Monte Carlo for the second part, which is what is the probability of this working? Right? How well does this strategy play off? And then so you could alter this to see, okay, how good is a hold at 30 strategy or hold at 10 strategy, right? Hold at X, which says basically, okay, as the previous exercise, but now allow this user to specify how many, what value they're going to hold, the computer will hold at. What's the probability of reaching 100 points in a single turn? Okay. And then hold at 20 or goal, which becomes a much more realistic situation. This is actually the one that people skip and gets them into trouble when they try to do the full program, which is that if you are above 80 points and your goal is hold at 20, you want to stop when you get to 100 points, right? So it doesn't make sense that once you are above 100 points to keep rolling. But sometimes they forget to program that in. So this is that stop when you get to at least 100 points kind of turn. It says, here's your score. I'm going to get at least 20 points or as much as it's going to take to win. And this just, again, just builds up. There's two parts. Why is this part of the Monte Carlo one? Because it has two Monte Carlo exercises in it. One is figuring out the percent strategy, or the percentage outcomes, and the other one is figuring out the average number of turns a game takes. Okay? Which is, these are fun. It's overall a very good lab because it's a game. And as you've learned, I like games. All right. So the plan for the next couple lectures, okay, will be as follows. Go over, so let's see, clear. Go over on 31, we're going to go over we'll do that over Zoom. I'll make an announcement as soon as class ends that we're going to do this over Zoom, and I'm going to be reviewing our lecture over Zoom. This also means I'll hold the office hours over Zoom as well. On October 5th, November 5th, I will be going over, I'll also send over the GitHub thing, and I'll do a review of that for anybody who's still not who's had any issues with the GitHub. November 7th will be proposal day, okay? November 12th will be Florida Man Day, or my Florida Man lecture, as I love to call it, which is my regular expressions lecture. I know those two things seem to have very little in common, but it's one of my favorite lectures to do. Regular expressions does not have a mandatory homework, and it does not have it's not mandatory. I will have a question on the final exam, but it's an optional question on the final exam. Again, the final exam, the way that's going to work is that I'm going to give like 7-ish questions, and you choose like 5 of them to do. Okay, so if you decide to learn regular expressions, it's going to be nice and easy for you. So, and then beyond that, we'll figure it out. Okay, so with that, I think I'm done with the lecture for today. So let's go ahead and stop recording and hopefully this worked.